All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining today for this session of Beyond the Spec Agentic Engineering with IBM Bob. We're going to be talking about Bob today. And more importantly than that, we're going to be talking about best practices for agentic engineering and what that looks like in this kind of world of working with our coding agents and all of those different things. So I'm pretty excited about it. Got some cool stuff to share with you. Hopefully, this is fun. So we are going to be doing a pretty interactive workshop today. So I will be talking some, and we will be going through as well some things you can experiment with. When we get to a certain point, I will be sharing a Git repo. So if you want to follow along, please do. This will be fun. If you've got Bob installed, it will help to have that already ready to go. Otherwise, feel free to follow along. This will be recorded so we can follow on later. All right. Well, cool. So quick intro. I am Ren. I am the technical lead of AI for developers in DevRel at IBM. And fundamentally, I love building cool stuff. I really enjoy the process of having a cool idea and going through that, turning it into something that is actionable, and then showing off the cool thing I built to people, to my friends and other coworkers. I just love doing that. And we are going to use IBM Bob today to learn some of those real world development practices of how I do that, how I go about exploring and investigating a new code base, building on top of that, and rapidly developing all of these different things. So, a quote from a mentor of mine, Grady Booch, where he talks about the entire history of software engineering is one of rising levels of abstraction. This is as it was, is now, and always shall be. And I really like that quote because there's a lot to software engineering where it has changed over the many years, right? We started with things like assembly language and then basic, and we went into compiled languages and we kept going and kept going and kept going. We ended up with things like Ruby on Rails. We ended up with low code, no code editors. And we've had another kind of seismic shift in that recently with the rise of agentic coding platforms like IBM Bob. And we're going to talk about that. So, the way we write code has changed. And that's just true, right? We use a lot more assistance now than we used to. One of my favorite quotes is actually from Matz, the creator of Ruby, who talks about the principles behind the Ruby programming language, where he said that fundamentally the goal of Ruby, and this is paraphrased, the goal of Ruby is it doesn't matter how hard the computer's job is, as long as the programmer's job is simpler, because programmers are harder to find than computers. So we go through this process as developers, right? We plan out what we're going to do. We work with our team. We figure out all of those different pieces around what does the plan look like, and then we build it. And then we come back to the team and we review and do pull requests and all of those different things. So it can be a pretty long cycle for that building. Except recently, we've seen a massive compression of that build cycle, right? With the rise of AI assisted coding, things like IBM Bob, we can do that part much faster. And it works really, really well at certain things. And we'll talk about that. The problem is, we intuitively, because our iteration cycle on building has moved to be so much faster, we think we need less time to plan as well. And that just isn't true, because that is what ends up with a very, very long review and pull request process. So, what we're going to talk about today is that coding was never the hard part, and alignment with your team, both humans and AI, all of the partners you have in this development process, that's the hardest part of this. And we're going to talk through some processes of getting the AI to understand your intent, making sure it did what you needed it to do, and working with it to accomplish these goals. So the way we code has changed, but the craft of our software engineering has changed much less. So that part is still very, very similar. So we're going to get practical today. About IBM Bob, your SDLC, or Software Development Lifecycle Partner. And we'll talk more about what that means and why that's important. But if you want to follow along, this is the GitHub repo that I have set up for this. So it's on GitHub. Anyway, that'll stay up. This recording will also be available. But if you want to follow along, that's a good repo to go ahead and clone while I go through the next couple of slides. So github.com/rwitna/Bob demo should be available. It's a very, very basic skeleton repo. If you'd rather follow along just by scaffolding something yourself, that's fine. I'll give some instructions on that too. All right. Oh, cool. So I want to level set on a couple of things about just working with an LLM when you're coding. There are a few tendencies that can happen because of the way LLMs work. That can be the way an LLM works is fundamentally through pattern matching, where it will go ahead and say, this is the thing that I expect comes next in the request you just made. So based on this request, this is what I should do. That is subtly different than telling it what to do. It just knows how to follow those instructions, not think through and do all of that. So there are some ways around that. And Bob is designed to provide additional quality gates, and we'll talk more about that too, to help prevent some of these problems, right? So removing old dead code is sometimes something that an LLM will forget to do because it doesn't have the entire context of the repo and what you're trying to do in its context window. Attempting implementation for testing ideas, hard coding things, these can happen. So we are going to talk through some ways to avoid that and make sure that you get good results. But I want you to remember that agentic engineering is non-deterministic. By that, I mean that LLMs do not give the same result every time to the same prompt. You will get different results than what I get today. And that's okay. That's actually good. What we're going to see is that we are going to learn practices today about how we, instead of just expecting the exact programming to work, we're going to learn processes and ways of handling failure cases and working with things to get a really good result in the end. So there's a few things we want to optimize for here. We have project trust, which is kind of how much I trust the repo I'm working on. There's human ownership, which is going to be my ability to control the state of the project. And the agent autonomy, where I want the agent to be able to make some progress without me having to monitor every single step of the way. So there's this concept of spec-driven development, and my colleague Gabe gives a really good talk about this. But the idea is that you maximize autonomy without sacrificing trust and ownership, where we need to retain, as humans, knowledge and ownership of the things we're building. But we still need the help of agents to move faster and get the things that we, like syntax, right? Like syntax is less important to me than whether it works. But some syntax can be architectural decisions. So we have to choose where we're going to give it autonomy and all those things. So there are 4 stages of spec-driven development, as it's called. There is requirements, building a spec, implementation, and verification at the end. And so to start out with, when you are building something, we generally start with gathering requirements. And that is actually arguably the hardest part of software development. People often know what they want, but they don't necessarily know what they need. So as developers, we often have to work together with stakeholders or product managers or users to understand where that problem is actually coming from and if the thing that we're trying to build is actually the thing that needs to be built. So with that, we need clear task description, implementation guidance, what we want those expected outcomes to be, and reference materials. And one of the things that's interesting here is as you go through requirements, one of our requirements is that it works. And we'll talk more about that, but we can go ahead and, as part of our iteration cycle, give the agent, give Bob some ability to test those things as it goes along. Give it the ability to verify and make sure all these different things work. And that can result in a faster iteration cycle. But as we continue on, we're going to explore Codebase real quick. And I'm going to show you some basics of Bob, and we're going to work with that. And then we're going to kind of come back and work together on the next piece of the puzzle. So let me change screens here over to Bob. So I have made a very small code repo. It's just a simple scaffold using a couple libraries I like and adding a skill. So we're going to go through all of that. And this is the basics of Bob. Now, for those who don't like using an IDE, there's also Bob Shell. And I'm a big fan of Bob Shell because it allows me to kind of have multiple Bob Shells open, work with each at the same time, and then kind of monitor that through my terminal interface because I write a lot of terminal code. But for the sake of today, I'm going to just show the same prompt working in both places and show how that works. So I'd like you to give me an executive summary of this repo quickly. What's it doing? And I'm going to copy paste that. And we're going to also run that in the UI. So very quickly, it's going to go through and examine some files in the repository. So it comes back with, hey, here's what it does. Here's a quick executive summary. It's looking at stuff. And you can see that those are slightly different results, right? It's still got most of the same information, right? It's still looking at the repository and making those changes, but I have made two queries, right? I get different results from each of those because there are different tasks and different tools. So this is a proof of concept, very basic. It's kind of a scaffold for the things we're going to build today. And all it does is it just has one root path, and it is a boilerplate that responds with a hello world. So pretty easy. But I would like it to actually ask me some details, or I would like to go through some details of that. So when I start thinking about this, I need to actually go through and design. We're going to switch over to plan mode. And we're going to say, hey, I need to expand this. This is a great starting point. Based on that starting point, I'd like to look at adding a simple authentication middleware. So I know how to do authentication, right? I've built a lot of web apps. And in this particular web framework, Hano, it's a great one if you haven't checked it out. In this particular web framework, there is an idea of a middleware that will go ahead and intercept those requests. So one thing that I know here is the architecture of what I want to build. But I may not know all of the details yet. So I'm going to work with Bob, and I'm going to let it actually help guide me on some of those decisions. So we're going to start there. I'd like to look at a simple authentication middleware. What considerations should I take into account? And let's actually, because I'm asking a question, let's use the ask mode, and we'll come back and do a plan in a second. So here we go. Session-based, token-based, API key, some different details. So here's a good way to do the middleware. Here's some things coming back. It can be a good way of answering those questions for you in a very, very quick way. Love it. Let's scaffold out a plan about the JWT with Hano's middleware and bcrypt. So pretty basic. It'll be pretty standard, but we're going to switch it back to plan mode so it will generate a plan. And we'll talk more about that plan in the next section. But first of all, we're going to go ahead and make that. We're going to see it actually coming through, and we'll talk more about that approval process that I'm going through here, about what it needs to do. But I would like to, I would like you to make a markdown plan for my review, please. Cool. So now we've got a basic plan that's generating real quickly here, the auth implementation plan. So it's going through and it's kind of coming up with, here's how I'd like to do this. And I can read through some of those things. And the interesting part about this is it's not quite a specification yet. This is kind of just, I've given it a couple requirements. I've given it some thoughts about how I want to do that. And getting from this to the actual spec of, I am okay with this, is a different discussion. And we're going to go to that now. So as I mentioned, the next phase is that spec. So we've got an implementation plan. We've made a very basic one out of that requirements page. So now we have consolidated task details, we have implementation phases, but I own the plan. Like, I need to make sure I really understand everything that's going on in that. And it's going to need to iterate until it's complete. So there will be a lot of work that it has to do in there where I am doing some of it, but a lot of it is in the implementation phase going to be heavy lifting from the actual agent, the LLM that's doing this work. So we're going to do validation for each phase, and we're going to do human feedback points. So let's go back to it, and we are going to have it grill us. So this is actually a really cool skill that is coming from a guy named Matt Pocock. And if you haven't come across his blog, it's brilliant. Take a look. I've got the link in here. And it's this idea of, hey, it is really valuable to read through the specification and understand it fully. That is one good way of doing it. But cognitive debt is a thing. If we miss something in there, if we don't understand something in there, it can be really easy to kind of glaze over a little bit, especially if we're tired or if we've been working for a long time that day. And if we miss something in there that we don't understand, it can be really hard to kind of recover from that and find where that edge case was that we missed in the initial specification. So in order to guide our LLM, guide our agent, Bob, in a better way to do all of this, we are going to actually have it ask us some questions. So going back to Bob, we're going to save that, and we're going to change over to advanced mode. And I am going to say, I would like you to grill me about the auth implementation plan. So I have implemented in here a skill. And it's going to go ahead and ask me some questions about that. So here's a skill. It's going to ask me some stuff about how do I want to do this. And we're going to go through and actually answer some of those questions as it comes up. So it's going through and it's coming up with some questions, and it knows how to access this grill skill. It's going to interview me, is the idea. So we're going to go back to this, and all right, it's still generating for a second. I'd like you to interview me about those per the grill me skill. All right, so we're going to do that real quick. There we go. Yes, you do. All right. So there we go. Now it's asking me some questions. So this is a demo learning project, so it doesn't really matter for this one. Security is important, but not mission critical. And we'll talk more about some of the security things we can do here, where it will go ahead and use those capabilities. So data persistence trade-off uses in-memory storage. I think in-memory storage is probably fine for right now, just because we're going to swap it out later if we continue to build this. But again, we're just implementing a quick feature here. So this is a trade-off that I am deliberately making to simplify the implementation that we are talking about today. But let's keep it in memory. So we're going to do that. Keeping it simple. Let's do some validation. I think that'd be a good part of our testing here, right? I don't really, let's do moderate validation. That sounds good. 8+ characters must include a letter and a number. So again, this is kind of pointing out things in there that I hadn't necessarily decided on yet. We're going to do an hour. Anyway, things like that. So it goes through and it generates some updates to the plan. And we're going to end up with a more specific spec at the end of this. So this is one way of going through it. The other way is just reading it or writing it yourself. That's also okay. Like this doesn't have to be the way you do it. One big thing about process is if there's a process that doesn't work for you, you should change it. So this is one way that we've found that is pretty useful, but doesn't have to be the only way, is not the only way. Like auto login. Anyway, so we're going to keep going back and forth on that, and then we're going to go ahead and do an implementation in just a minute here. Authentication error messages. Login fails. Should we tell this user specifically what's wrong? Invalid credentials. I'm a big fan of some specific security things. There should not be ever like, hey, this isn't the correct email address, different things like that. Let's update the plan with what we've decided so far. So I'm going to actually kind of interrupt it there so we can go back to do that. And it's going to go ahead and make changes to the plan and update it with the decisions that I just made. So really useful, really helpful that it can do that. A lot of flexibility there. So when we talk about a skill, this is a skill. A skill is just a basic prompt or series of instructions. It may have more than one file where it can do progressive enhancement here. And it is popping some stuff up for me. So I'm going to go back here. And one of the things here is that this has an initial part that kind of gives the LLM an idea of where does that skill, where is that skill, right? What is that skill? And then it will actually run the particular prompt that's part of that skill a little bit, based on whether it discovered that that is the skill it needs to run. So it's going to do that, and we're going to go ahead and save these changes. I'm going to read them real quickly here. That looks good. Yep. hmm And fine. Cool. So we're going to save that. Again, this is kind of the process of building out that specification. So we've got an update here. Great. What do we do next? Well, popping back over here, we are going to actually go into the next phase, which is implementation. And implementation is interesting because this is the part where the LLM, the agent, Bob, actually has the most autonomy. It has the most flexibility in terms of what it's doing, what it's trying to do, and how it accomplishes those goals. So we are going to give it certain abilities. We're going to give it tools. We're going to give it the ability to edit code. And we are going to have approval guardrails and human feedback, tests, spot testing, progress tracking, auto acceptance. All of those different things come into a play here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to do that, but we're going to make sure we are keeping ownership of what ends up being a result. So let's talk about what keeping ownership means in this context, because I think it's really easy to fall into the trap of what we would call vibe coding, where you are just saying, make me a thing, right? And there's a balance here where if you write a specification that is detailed enough in order to accomplish the correct goal with a large language model every single time, no matter what model you're using, if you have written a spec that is detailed enough for it to do that, you have written the software. There is an important in-between balancing act that we need to follow in order to make sure that we are both giving it enough detail that it can do the thing that we want it to do, and also making sure we don't boil the ocean, that we actually are working with the LLM as our development partner instead of just kind of telling it what to do, because that's coding. But one of the important parts that we need to do there is not just telling it what to do, but learning as we go along. So for those who are senior developers, you're probably familiar with a lot of these concepts already, and that's good. If you're not, that's also good, because these are the things you learn as you are becoming a senior developer, where you learn that you need to own your code, you need to learn how to do those reviews, you need to learn how to do all those things. And it's really easy to fall into the trap of, hey, this thing seems like it's doing it for me, I'm just going to do that. And what we need to do is we actually need to keep ownership of not only the decisions, but the knowledge as we go along, because that makes us better developers. That gives us the ability to understand all of these things as we go forward and be an even better partner with Bob. So we're going to go over and we're going to talk about that in Bob. So I'm going to tell it, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to start, and let's do a quick implementation based on that plan. So we're going to start there. We're going to actually make that feature, do that. If you're following along, this is pretty easy, but we're going to actually run some commands so it can go ahead and install bcrypt, and it will validate some of these things as it goes along. So it has installed a package, it is doing a quick set of types. And I think this is an important thing to get across is I am using TypeScript, and that's actually a pretty deliberate choice for this. Python is also great, but we highly recommend, if you are going to be working with a large language model, if you're going to be working with IBM Bob, you're going to have some better results if you are using a typing system or other validation gates. And we'll get more into that in just a second. But giving it the ability to check its own work, whether that is via tests or these validation gates or a linter or type system. So here we can see there isn't yet, the user isn't imported yet. And it's going to notice that, and it's going to figure that out. Let me fix the TypeScript import issue. So it actually had the wrong type, the wrong import there. It needs to import a type instead. So it's going to do that now, and it caught its error as it went along. So if you haven't been using those things, there's a lot that you can do to set up your repo from the beginning in order to have better results here. Now, you may notice that over here, I've saved this as a markdown file, this big plan that we just made. And that's really useful for a couple of reasons, but it's also important to keep in mind that that can drift over time, right? There can be changes, there can be difference. There's a lot of different ways of categorizing that knowledge that you end up developing, right? That could be via some sort of team memory, that can be via a GitHub repo, that can be actually in the repo as markdown files. Um, the one thing that I'm going to say is, like, if there are traditional ways of doing that for humans, right? Like, we can do um, what are called ADRs, or architectural decision records. Those tend to be very deltas, incremental, built on each other, and that can confuse some of these coding agents, right? Because they don't necessarily know which one is the newest. So I recommend, if you're going to keep it in the repo, try to keep it up to date. Actually have the agent help you keep it up to date. Bob is really good at writing documentation. Have it keep those documentation requests up to date based on the things you've done in the repo. So we're making some quick changes here. And when we get done, we're going to have it actually record its changes in the README file so that I can go ahead and make sure it works. So it's doing a quick boot up. All right, so proceed while running. Looks good. Seems good. It's writing a quick test script. I'm actually going to tell it not to do this because I don't want a shell script to test that. I would like an actual testing test, right? Like vtest or something like that. Can we instead use vtest for that? So it disappears, right? I rejected that thing. So we're actually going to set up a quick testing repo. Vtest is a solid one that I use a lot in Node, but it's going to go ahead and install that. It's going to make a quick config for it, all of those different things that are necessary, because I am telling it, let's go ahead and test those pieces. So we can have it write tests for us, and we also need to validate those and make sure that they are doing a good job along the way. So we're going to see that. Okay, it's got the configuration. This file no longer exists. That's great. So part of the ownership is actually this right here. Do you see this auto approve section? You can pick which things you're okay with it doing. So I'm going to say I like it. I know the skills. It can go ahead and approve a skill without asking me. But maybe write I want to keep track of, or browser. You can choose and have a lot of flexibility here. You can also go into Bob's settings up here and actually configure specific things that you are okay or not okay with it doing. So like if you have wanted to be able to do terminal commands by default, make sure that you go ahead and block list some of those that you don't want it to do. Or ideally only allow list the ones that are like worth going through automatically. So again, retaining ownership over the decisions we make, because fundamentally, Bob is not the one who's going to be woken up in the middle of the night if something's wrong. You are. So we need to make sure that as we work with these tools, that we are getting the best results out of them by working with them and making sure that we end up with a solid end result. So it's going to go ahead and run that test for me. Looks pretty good. We'll see. All 32 tests pass. All right, so it's now writing some documentation as an automatic end result of that, where this is how it goes ahead and works the actual API. So once this is done, it's going to have details of how that works and all of those different things. I can probably actually delete the implementation plan so it doesn't get confused in the future about how it was, if it needs to do that still. So we have now documentation that it's made about the end result, and that's great. But we don't need this anymore. So we're actually going to get rid of this file when it's done. I'm not going to confuse it while it's working. But when it's done, we're going to delete the auth implementation plan, and the README gets updated and all those different things. So we will go through and validate all of this, especially before doing a code review or all those different things, because I don't want to dump thousands of lines on my coworker. I want to make sure that what we ended up with is actually good. So this looks pretty solid. This is not too long. It's about a 131 line README. That's probably fine in this case, because I did do some pretty big feature development here. So just in about half an hour so far, we've gone through this repo, we've gone through some changes, and we've gone ahead and made some stuff. So I'm going to approve that. That looks like I think we've done a feature. So the next question is, well, how do we make sure that worked? And we've done some of that already, right? We've done some testing, we've done some other stuff, but the verification phase, the validation gates, as I like to call them, are really, really important here. This is where we go ahead and actually make sure that not only does it work, but I have retained that mental ownership of the code and know enough that I can use it for other things, that I can build upon that I can talk intelligently about it with my coworkers, and that I can answer questions on the pull review. So let's go ahead and hop back to Bob. And it's going to go ahead and boot it up real quick. It runs a quick manual test here. All right, it curled it. That looks good. So it gives me a task completed summary. That's great. What I am going to do here, though, is I'm actually going to open a new task because that's pretty good, but it's been doing a lot for a little bit here. So I would like it to go ahead and this is going to be probably one for advanced mode. I would like you to go ahead and do a code review of the change made for auth API. I'm going to delete that implementation plan. So it's not answering questions from there. It's only going to do the things it actually looked at. I would like you to go ahead and do a code review. I am not, for the record, I am not only doing a machine code review. What I'm doing is I'm trying to highlight things that I might need to take a deeper look at as a human. Again, we don't trust one person to YOLO code into main, typically. We go through a process called pull reviews, where we go ahead and push it up, we show the changes that have been made, and we allow our coworkers to take a look at it. In this case, since I'm Bob's coworker, I'm also going to take a look at the things it's been doing. And your level of, and highlight, your level of comfort with this may depend on what you're working on. Any issues? All right, so we're going to have it go. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because one of the things here is depending on what you're working on, you may have a different appetite for risk, right? Different things can happen when you're working with an LLM, and that's great. It can build things very, very quickly. If you have a hallucination along the way, because LLMs fundamentally do hallucinate, Bob comes with some additional things to try and help you catch that. So like findings here, it will go ahead and tell me, hey, there's a secret that it's gone ahead and put in here. It will go ahead and tell me, okay, there's a problem here. And that's great. It can go ahead and keep me from ever committing a secret to the repository, which keeps me from leaking stuff that I shouldn't. I appreciate that. The thing is that depending on what I'm working on, if I'm working on a React UI for a demo, I may give it a lot more autonomy. I may let it kind of do its thing. And when I'm working on something that is detailed financial or compliance related, I am going to probably read every single line of code. Because again, I feel I am responsible for the code I ship. I think that the things that I do are important and it's valuable to have an AI SDLC partner like in IBM Bob. I get a lot done much faster, but I still need to make sure that what we end up with is going to work for not only me, but my team. So let's hop back. And it's gone ahead and it's found some things. It's added them all to this Bob findings panel. So we can see here, test auth, it's found some secret keywords. It's found an inconsistent naming convention for a route variable. It can go ahead and recommend some changes to me. So if I hop over to that in routes protected, line 4, yeah. So we can see some of those different things. So it's got a unusual naming convention there. That's not really how JavaScript does variable names. So it's gone ahead and caught that and recommended that maybe I want to change that to camel case because that is generally how that's done in TypeScript and JavaScript. So catching some of those things early and fixing them before you push up your code can be a really, really valuable exercise. And again, this isn't the only thing you need to do. This is just one tool that we have in our toolbox to make this a little bit easier for us. If you want to be really brutal, you can ask it to act like it's a senior developer and go through and really critique stuff. It will do that. And it's really fascinating to see all of that in action. So jumping back here, we've now looked at some validation gates. We've gone through all those different pieces. And again, I want to mention that you are responsible for the code you ship because you are the one who gets woken up for it, right? If there is something that happens where a database goes down or things like that, the AI might apologize for it, but it's not going to be able to fix it without your help. We are the hands, we are the code owners, we are the people who are working with these tools. And Bob is really great at kind of partnering with you on that because it provides a whole bunch of capabilities to own and govern the results of that code. So a lot of this that I've talked about may feel a little familiar. I've been using a lot of terms like testing and validation and requirements gathering and things like that. And don't worry, that's just because we've done this before. So when we talk about the software development lifecycle, there's a lot of different things that end up happening there, right? It is planning, it is coding, it is building that, testing it. And then there's also all the day two stuff of actually releasing it and deploying it and getting feedback that feeds back into the next cycle. So this is a version of the software development lifecycle. And we've seen this before, right? Waterfall, Agile, and DevOps. We've done this. We have these skills. We know how to do all of these things. This is just applying those to this new world of agentic development because your experience doesn't go away. It's actually more valuable than ever when we talk about all these things. We are building more. We are building faster. You being able to learn and stay in the driver's seat of this is actually a really valuable skill. So again, if something doesn't work for your workflow, go ahead and change it. Make a change. Tweak things. Get messy. Make mistakes. Play with it. And I think that's really, really a valuable thing to remember is there is no best way to do this. These are ways that work well for me. But by learning some of these principles, right? Learning how to react to things that go ahead and change, go ahead and tweak, things that go well, things that don't go well, we can end up with really, really good results over time. So I can't wait to see what you all build. Please enjoy the hackathon over the next day or so. And thank you for joining me. I'm going to hop over to answer some questions real quickly. If you've got anything, throw it in the chat and I will be right there with you. All right? Cool. Well, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing real quickly. And we're going to hop back over to the question section. So I have got a whole bunch of questions in here. Oh, gosh. Cool. So quick questions. So IBM monitored Bob coins with Shell and IDE. Can Shell run without Bob coins? It cannot. So Bob coins is kind of an abstraction around tokens. Everything when we work with an LLM is based on token count, where the cost of everything is based on how many tokens you generate, the size of your context window, whether it hit a cache, which model you're using, all of those different things. So it ends up being able to use all of those different capabilities at the cost of being able to, a token cost. And the way we represent that, because we use multiple different models in the back end to try and save money for you and make it cheaper for you to be able to do software development, we go ahead and pass those savings on to you in the form of Bob coins. So if you look in the upper right of Bob, you see that not only is there a token count, like for instance, in the most recent one I did, there was about 32K tokens used. It also shows that I've used about 0.19 Bob coins for that particular request. So in that whole section, all of that context, it was about 32,000 tokens. Now, context windows can get pretty big. And one of the things that's valuable to know here is that it will go ahead and compact things if it gets too large. That's a pretty standard approach for doing some of those things, where you can end up with a very, very large context window that then gets compressed down to a smaller size, kind of with a summary and all those different things about being able to do those pieces. So it will do some token saving for you by doing that if it gets too large. And it will also pass things through. Any cost savings that goes through get passed on to you. So that's important. Shell cannot run without Bob coins. It uses the exact same connection. It is just another client into the same agentic loop. as the IDE is. They're both good, and they are great. So, um, do I suggest hard coding versions of libraries in the spec? Depends. If it is something that's going to really matter, one of the things that can be an issue with large language models is because of the way they are trained, right? They do some fine tuning at a particular point in time where they go ahead and learn from those things. They tend to use outdated libraries a little bit. So making sure that you are referencing a particular version of a library in your spec, if you know what you want to do, that can be really valuable. As well as pegging versions in your package.lock or your PyProject.toml, whatever you've got there can be a really, really valuable way to do that. So I do recommend doing it if it is important to your repo, and I definitely recommend doing something like npm audit fix when you're done to make sure that you haven't ended up with something that has a known vulnerability in it. Because keeping packages up to date is a pretty critical part of software. You should have CI/CD as you go into production, like you do with anything in the software development lifecycle, to make sure that you update those and keep them up to date, so that maybe you don't have to even do that manually. Just be make mindful that like software supply chain issues are a thing. So we had a couple of big kind of cataclysmic events in both the Python and JavaScript ecosystems over the last year, right? Where a new version of a package got what was compromised, right, by a third-party attacker. Making sure that you are controlling when those updates happen can be really valuable. So again, depends a little bit on your use case and whether you control the package that's coming in, whether you trust the package that's coming in, but it's all a matter of that risk tolerance. Did I just stop Bob while I was in the middle of generating a script generating? If so, how? Yes, I did. I actually, when it asked me for approval, there's both an interrupt button, and I actually just gave it a different instruction when it asked me for something. So I told it not to do that. And it did something else. For creating markdown files, will it take additional Bob points? Yes. But I find it to be very valuable. The reason I do that is because then I can read it and go through the specification, and it's pretty cheap, right? Generating a markdown file is generally a short instruction where it goes ahead and calls a tool call about stuff it's already generated that's in the cache. So it's not really like that expensive. I generally recommend doing that though, just so you can do a better read through of all the things and making sure it's good. Cool. Can I change the model when I run out of Bob coins? Not at this moment. Do the skills markdown for Bob and IDE or shell carry over from sessions or products? Good question. You can actually do either one. You can either include them directly in the, you can either do them directly in the repo, like if you want them to be project specific, or you can do them in your workspace, kind of at your home directory level. If you include them in your home directory level, they will be automatically included in every single Bob project that you then work with. So they are very flexible with that. So those carry over, or you can have specific ones that are versioned with your particular repo that everyone on your team can use because your project should be checked into Git. So all those different things. Quick question. Can Bob maintain context across concurrent tabs, and does new tabs also maintain context from previous sessions? So there is a log, and you can resume a tab from, resume a task from a previous tab. So you can go ahead and in the main screen, it has previous tasks there. You can choose one to resume. Other than that, different tabs inside the same IDE will generally be the same context, right? You run one session in there. But if you're running multiple sessions in your console, for instance, using Bob Shell, those will actually have separate session state. And that's actually valuable to me in that I often have one thing that's working at one time. Like I might have something that's implementing while I'm doing an investigation and while I'm working on a plan. So I may have multiple sessions going on all at once, and different things like that. Will there be a version of Bob to use local LLM used to NDAs or private code bases? I actually can't speak to that right now. So we will have, anyway, there are works in the plans, but I can't talk to that. So There are options for private code bases, yes. All right. Um, any other questions? All right. Then I'm going to go ahead and say thank you so much for joining me today. I think this has been really a lovely session. I am available on LinkedIn. I am R. Whitna there. You can find me at Rin Whitna. Pretty easy to find me there. I'm the only Rin Whitna. But yeah, reach out if you got further questions to follow up. Feel free. Uh, Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us today, not only for this session but the whole Bob Dev Day. This has been a great time today, and I hope you've learned a lot. I know there's a hackathon following up. I'm excited to see what you all build. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time.